Okay, I can see that probably people are still signing in, but welcome everybody to another Futures Teacher session under the banner of the Reborn Series. For those that are new to Future Teacher, if you view the resource, and we'll put the link in the text chat where you signed up, we have this Reborn page that has all the sessions we've been delivering and hosting under that banner. But if you use the menu, you'll find all the previous sessions and recordings and resources under all of the topics that we've done in the previous years. At the top of the page here, you'll see that there's some details about the history of the project and our principles and so on. You'll then find the summary and also the registration form for today's session, because we leave that in place while we're delivering the webinar. People sign up late. You'll then find the welcome panel and the information about the two guest speakers today. And then from about 1:30, I think, there'll be the registration form for the January session live. So you'll just need to refresh the page if you're viewing it. I'll stop my screen sharing and hand over to, I think it might be Alistair that's going to introduce our first speaker.
No, actually it was Sian, because Paul goes first.
Hi, so I'm going to introduce Paul Cross, who is a senior lecturer in the environment in Bangor University, where I also work. Paul is going to talk about alternative assessments using recorded assignments in Bangor. Paul is also a researcher into all things bees and beekeeping and other things as well. But those are the things that I know about, and kind of tracking systems for pollinators. And between us both now, I'm going to share Paul's slides in a minute. So I just bring Paul's slides up for him. I hope I've given you a good introduction there, Paul. It's put it together very quickly a few minutes ago.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I won't be a second. I'll share the screen now as well. Okay, so I'm going to share. Let's get this. Can you see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yep.
Yeah.
Not in presentation mode yet.
I'm going into presentation mode. Sorry, and I'll go to Paul's first slide, and then you just tell me to move the slides on, Paul, as and when.
Okay, well, I'll just add a bit more to my background very briefly. Yeah, I'm really interested in tracking pollinators, particularly bees, and we've developed a tracking device for that, which will take no further part in this presentation. For the last 14, 15 years, I have been lecturing on aspects of wildlife conservation, particularly to second-year undergraduate and master's conservation students. Okay, next slide.
Okay, I've moved to the next slide. Can you see it?
Yeah, okay. So I do a thing, a recorded panopto, so recorded PowerPoint presentations or equivalent for both the second year and master's students. And this came about, so I've been doing it with the master's students since about 2015. But for the undergraduate classes, two reasons sort of drove me to change from what I used to do, which was assessed interviews. And we'd done these for the undergraduate students up to about 2019, and that required them to do two 10-minute interviews on a random topic from the module, and with different members of staff. So yeah, we had pretty high anxiety amongst 30% of the students, and I would say up to 10% of them were in tears, and that just wasn't a good experience for them or the person interviewing them. So I needed to get away from that, not just because of wanting to ease the pain, but this as well. If you've ever tried to organise more than one other member of staff to help you out on a thing where they have to be in the right place at the right time, you're better off trying to do it with second year undergraduates, because the staff are chaotic at times. So I shifted from that to doing recorded presentations, and I haven't looked back really. I think it was a really good decision. So I'm going to in a moment show you a brief clip from what is a well delivered piece of work from a member. Not so fast, Sean.
Sorry,
Okay.
apologies.
Sorry. No, you're good. You're good where you were.
Okay, do you want me to move to the next slide? Sorry.
Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. So yeah, I'm going to show you this clip, and basically this was the remit. So they had to respond to this question: to what extent can the conservation of insect pollinators ever be compatible with modern agricultural practice? And that could be, so they might look at things like land use change, monocrops, particularly pesticide usage, and a new family of pesticides called neonicotinoids that have had a significant impact on pollinators, particularly bees. And then the next part of this is their audience would be we, the general public, walking into the foyer of some sort of conservation organisation, RSPB or Wildlife Trust. And this video would be showing there, informing the public of this particular question. Next bullet. Ideally, it would look like something ready-made for Countryfile, so a 5-minute clip that was seamless and what have you, with face-to-camera, video in the field, graphs and figures and all sorts, maybe even music if they like. So that was the most sort of the higher end expectation, and the lower end baseline is pretty much what I'm doing, which is a series of bullet points. Have you got the next?
Yeah.
Can you do the next one, Sean?
Okay.
Yeah, and its most basic is what I'm doing. So a presentation where you can't see the person necessarily, and they're just going through their slides. But there's audio, with the PowerPoint slides. So that's the remit. You can go to the next one, Sean, and don't click it straight away. So this is a very short clip, and there's a couple of things I can mention on this one after we've looked at it. But this is, I must admit, this is one of the best videos I've had of students. This is a master's student. Do you want to click this, press play, Sean?
However, wild bees have seen dramatic range contractions and population declines.
I'm just checking the sound is playing.
I can hear it.
You can hear it, yeah?
Yeah.
In recent decades. For example, the great yellow bumblebee we can see on the map here has retreated to this extreme and limited range, and this is a very common and worrying trend. Numbers of wild bees in the UK could become inadequate to meet the future demand for crop pollination. Now, this poses a serious threat to food security, particularly with the increasing pressures and challenges that farmers are facing through climate change. Now, one of the major drivers of this decline in solitary bees is habitat loss and land use change due to agriculture.
Okay, so there's a lot going on there, and these are things that the students are encouraged to do, and they are mentioned we have a lecture on how to do these assignments. And we mentioned things like walking, face to camera, walking in and out of shot, and a range of other things. But and I'll talk about some of the aspects that were in that clip in a moment. If you want to click onto the next slide, Sean. Okay. And I'm going to talk about advantages and disadvantages for both students and staff on this stuff. So the first one is that it removes these, which was a problem in the previous sort of version with the assessed interviews. It removes this anxiety of face-to-face presentation, especially in groups, larger than 10. So that's a positive for the students, and they seem to cope much better with recording themselves speaking to the laptop. Next one, Sean. So it allows us to upskill the students in creating dynamic presentations. The next one, some examples of this. Okay, bullet points, showing bullet points one at a time. Image throughput, so a high turnover of images in the slides. Dynamic images, zooming in and out of the images. And freest reign, so they get a broad remit in terms of the question, but they also have quite a broad remit on how they want to do this. I just offer up Countryfile as a guiding sort of principle of how they might want to do their presentation. Next one, Sean. Okay, so some of them have done it, the entire presentation as a poem written by themselves, talking about pollinator declines. Others in the style of an American sort of noir film style, detective style. Others play guitars and have written songs and will sing it. Next one, Sean. So a whole range of, I mean, they're more the exceptions I've shown there than the rule. The rule is they'll do a standard clip of presenting the science, what have you. Yeah, presentation techniques, another click, Sean. Walking into and out of frame, so you know they're given guidance on doing that sort of thing. Panning the camera, so they shoot all of this on their mobile phones. No one has they could borrow a camera if they wanted to from the university, but the idea is you could do this on your mobile phone. Next one, Sean. Yeah, and voiced over presentation is the standard format. Okay, so there is a baseline to this, which is less challenging.
Okay.
Yeah, and students, they do really get into it. I mean, they get deeply engrossed in doing this. Next one, and they all want to do it really well, or many of them.
Next slide.
Okay, so this is some of the stuff that's important for us. One is, as they mentioned, facts and figures. So this is a clip from Anya's video you saw. Is they need to cite the study. That may be just general good practice anyway with presentations, but it's key for this. And then copyright for image use off the internet. And they can insert graphs and music. Music was running over the top of this as they did it. Next one, Sean. So I'm currently undergraduates. I'm doing it with 208 students. So imagine doing that in a room where they have to come up and stand in front of a reduced number, but even 30 or 40 sometimes can be really challenging for some of our students. Next, Sean. They are relatively quick to grade. Next. Co and double markers. So they don't need to be in the same room as you when you're doing this. When you're doing live presentations, and you need double marking, you know, you need at least one other member of staff, and imagine trying to do it with large numbers. So it really works well with large numbers. Next, Sean, please. Yeah, external examiners are happy because they've got a record of what you did and they can evaluate that as an assignment. Next. They only need their mobile phone or a laptop. Laptop if they want to record it at home, but you know, they obviously have facilities in the university to record it here. And there's freely available editing software. Next slide, Sean. And Sean comes in on this bit during the module. She presents for up to an hour of the different bits of software that are out there free to use and how to use them. Next slide, Sean. Thanks. Disadvantages for students. So there's still an issue with nerves for 1 or 2. So I've got a couple this year in the undergraduates. They can't bring themselves to talking to the laptop, and so we're at a complete standstill about what to do for that. Initially, they're a bit anxious about a new assignment, but it soon resolves itself. It's not that friendly to people who leave assignments to the very last minute because you need to curate a whole series of images and what have you, and it does require a bit of a time commitment from the student. Next one. Sound quality. I don't know how I'm doing. I've got about 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. Sound quality can be challenging if you're doing it outside. Wind is always the problem, especially in North Wales. And if they don't check what they've recorded, they find themselves stuck with a piece of video where you can't actually hear them speak. So that can be an issue. Next.
Still a couple of minutes.
Yep. Okay, great. It can definitely take a while to upload to the server. So they uploaded their assignments on the 13th of November, and no matter how many times you tell them, you'll still have about 75% who are uploading their assignment 30 minutes before the deadline, and that's a heap of data that the system has to cope with. Copyright. So Sian again talks about copyright, what is and isn't acceptable, about commons access and what have you, free usage, and they don't always get that as well. Next. Okay, disadvantages for staff. So you do need a precise remit, and this is actually more a note to myself, because I've given this really broad and open-ended assignment sort of title, and then you get a lot of emails just clarifying, does that mean in the UK only, or is it global, etc. So and yeah, you know, is this commons accessible? Can I use my own photos? Anyway, yeah, but it doesn't take up too much of my life having to respond to that. Chinks in the armour. So I've had last year a student used her grandmother's voice because it was way better than hers, although I thought hers was fine. And I wasn't. Yeah, I said to her, well, what am I grading here? Is it your grandmother or what? So there's always these chinks in the armour on this stuff. Third-party footage exclusively, so they just stitch together a load of video and talk over. That's not quite so good. Okay, we're good. Imposters. This has come to light with chats with my colleague next door. I don't actually know if the person speaking is the person, is actually the student signed up for that. So I'm going to have to resolve that next year. I've got a solution. And then AI, sort of related. Definitely joyful to watch. And let's go to the next one and finish with a clip of someone who closed out their. Oh, you have this scrolling references at the end like a film. And this is Jonas, and this was at the end of his. He has said.
Who's that buzzing all around?
That's all right.
You're looking for a spot to build your nest on the ground. Bumblebees today must feel so blue, 'cause we've left nowhere for you. You're at the northernmost part of your range, which means you're vulnerable to climate change. With wilder weather, what's a bee to do? 'Cause we've left nowhere for you. The rarest bees feed on legumes.
Yeah, sorry, moved to that a bit quick for you, Paul.
All right, we're good. Yeah, so I'll finish on that.
I loved it. Yeah, really wonderful. Now there's loads of. Sorry, I'll put my video on if I can. I've got a bit of bandwidth problem today, but we'll see if I can survive. Yeah, thank you very much for that, Paul. Loads of things, questions and comments and so to look at in the chat. We won't answer them now. Well, you may want to answer some of them in the chat as we're going, but we can have a discussion time as soon as Chris has finished. So I will introduce Chris now. Chris, learning designer at University of Portsmouth, just across the way from where I am, with a particular interest in inclusive curriculum and assessment. You know that somebody is going to bring something interesting when you have people contact you off list to say, I'm not going to be able to be there, but I really want to hear what Chris is saying about about the alternative assessment approaches at Portsmouth, and so that's happened to me. Fortunately, we are being recorded, so both Paul and Chris will be available, even to people that don't manage to make it to the session. So without further ado, Chris, over to you. And we can see your screen. That's all looking perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, colleagues. And thank you, Paul. So as a guitarist for 25 years, really appreciated that student putting a little bit of guitar in the end there as well, which was lovely. So what I'm going to talk to you today about, colleagues, is inclusive assessment and our alternate assessment pilot that we did at Portsmouth University. So my name is Chris. I'm a learning designer, so I work in the Centre of Academic and Digital Innovation. So I always have to put that on my slides because I forget it half of the time on there. So my background's in FE. So I taught for 12 years in FE in Portsmouth. And those that don't really know Portsmouth know that Portsmouth's a very transgressional city. So we're a naval city. We have a lot of families come in, families come out. And I often taught students that had very little to no GCSEs, but my specialism was music production, but they could produce beats like there was no tomorrow. And I really developed this love for alternate assessments and different ways of assessing and going away from that traditional essay. And this is what our alternate assessment pilot kind of based itself on. So what we're going to have a look at today, we're going to have a look at kind of the rationale behind it. We're going to explore some examples from the alternate assessment, and then kind of share some initial findings on here, and kind of how it's leading our practice going forward, and how we see this kind of going out within the sector, and kind of wider issues within higher education and assessment. So this is kind of the study in a nutshell. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to enable our students to demonstrate their learning outside of traditional assessment practices and norms. So we wanted to give students that the varied approach and the variety to still meet all of those learning outcomes, but showcase their learning in a way that suited them. So this was put together by our Dean of Digital Learning, Ale Armelini, and the objectives of the alternate assessment pilot were these three here. So to redesign that and trial alternate assessments, so using innovative, authentic assessments, including assessment choice. Now, we didn't want to fall into the trap of just going, oh yeah, we're doing an authentic assessment, because that's just a buzzword. Like that doesn't mean anything unless we're truly redesigning. We wanted to support staff, students, safe and responsible use of AI within assessment. And we wanted to really have a look at our own assessment. So really assessing what our students are actually doing and what we're asking students to do. And thinking about how this then builds those skills for students going on into their future careers, whether that's future study or into industry or wherever it is from there. With two caveats: without compromising any rigor or quality or standards, and with a little bit of relaxation on our assessment regulations. So that was the pilot, and this is the kind of the objectives that we set out. So the first thing that we did is we had a look at some of the research behind this. And if we have a look at authentic assessment here, all the research kind of points to this idea of you have a traditional approach and then you have what's deemed as an authentic approach with it. So rather than students say selecting a response, the authentic assessment might be that they perform a task. So the traditional assessment might be seen as very artificial, whereas authentic, like we saw in a lot of Paul's work as well, it's that real life. So it's students going out and actually doing it rather than this kind of, oh, I'm going to write about it. I'm actually going to go out, I'm going to demonstrate it. So that traditional approach of just recalling information, just being able to, we essentially teach to a test with it. If we move away from that, we understand then that construction of knowledge, this construction, the application of learning becomes much more authentic. And most importantly, behind the back of this is that it moves away from being teacher structured to student structured. Now, I'm sure colleagues in the room will know the kind of the age-old kind of pushback that comes from here is that, oh, essays are nice and easy to mark. I can smash out marking a load of essays really quickly, but when I've got videos, they're a little bit more difficult to mark. And we've seen from Paul's examples here as well that, do you know what? Actually, students can demonstrate their learning in totally different ways away from that kind of traditional essay approach, particularly in the age of generative AI. If we have a look again at what the literature says here, so we wanted to create assessment opportunities for students that are meaningful. So where they can demonstrate their skills, knowledge, their competencies, and this can be in a number of different ways. And I draw ideas from when I was teaching in further education. A lot of my students, they couldn't write an essay. If you asked them to write 1,000 words on the history of Britpop, like they'd really struggle with that. But they could create an amazing podcast about that, where they'd talk about it. They'd showcase their learning in a totally different way. And we took some of these ideas, took some of these concepts, and brought them into higher education and brought them into our alternate assessment pilot here. So the way that we did this. So this is obviously quite radical in terms of higher education, kind of moving away from kind of a traditional approach. So we went out to academics and we said, oh, if you'd like to sign up for this, this is what we're looking to do. We'd love you to come along to a pilot workshop. So the University of Portsmouth is really lucky. So I work in a team of 7 learning designers that are all super, super talented. And we were able to work one-on-one with academics that signed up and create bespoke assessment options for them. So we help these academics design, construct, implement their alternate assessment. And we had around about 20 alternate assessments that ran in the academic year 24-25. Now, it wasn't for students that, but just because the academic on that module was part of this pilot here, they didn't have to do that alternate assessment. It was offered as an option, and students had the choice. This was really, really important to us that students had the choice that they could opt in to the alternate assessment, or they could do the traditional, if you want to, assessment that was originally on there. I'm halfway through, Alistair.
Oh,
Thank you.
perfect.
There you go. Cool. To preempt the bell.
Yeah.
There you go. So that's how we kind of recruited into this. And one of the big underpinning factors here, and if we're going to take anything away from my presentation today, is take this away here, is that we offer differentiated paths to the same learning outcome. So it's really come from that idea of when I was teaching in further education that students don't necessarily have to write something. They could draw it, they could podcast it, they could TikTok it, and see the love in the room for this, which is great. They could AI it, they could write a poem, they could do a presentation about it. And sometimes we're kind of stuck in this kind of real traditional mindset of, oh, everything needs to be a 3,000 word academic essay. And it's like that's not the case with this. So to show you some of the examples of the alternate assessments that we did use on here. So I've hidden the module names and they're kind of the subject areas around you can kind of see here. So this one here we're calling legally binding. So this one here, so the current assessment was 3 artifacts. So I was heavily involved with this one here, and we're writing a research paper on this, on the findings of this ones. So 3 artifacts, so an essay that was 50%, a poster that was 40%, and a discussion that was worth 10% on there. So the artifacts didn't actually change on this, but what the alternate assessment part of it was that students could choose the weighting of each component. So if you were particularly good at discussing things, you could weight that component higher compared to, say, the essay. You could weight the poster higher if you felt that you would do better within that one. And the big thing about this when we spoke with the academics and we were designing the learning about this. So what if a student chose a worse weighting? So if I said, oh, I think I'm going to do really well on the essay and I actually do really badly on the essay. So what we did is we used similar to a degree classification where we took the 2 grades. So we worked it on the original weighting and then the alternate weighting if that was selected. Whichever one was the highest, that was the one that went through from there. So students had no disadvantage by taking on the alternate weighting behind this, but it allowed them to kind of really self-evaluate and reflect on their own skills and then develop that and put basically where the weighting where they felt was best suited for them. So this one here, so it's called the rhythm code. So it was a music artifact here. So the traditional approach or the current approach was a practical artifact with a written report. So we still kept the practical artifact, but the written report, students had a choice. So they could do that traditional written report, which was 1,500 words on there. They could do a video. They could do an open book viva where the academic would sit down with them. And in this instance here, the students created an audio effects plugin, and then the academic would sit down with them and talk through it, and they'd record it and say, hey, show me these features here. Where did you take the research from that? How did you design this, etc. And it was open book as well. So students could bring in notes into it, or they could record that as like a video, like a tutorial like you'd see in industry, or like a product showcase like you'd see in industry. So that idea of that we're creating authenticity behind the back of it. So this one here, community project here. So you can see the traditional assessment here. So two parts, a case study. It's a 750 word proposal and then a 2,000 word project proposal here. So we can see here a lot of written elements behind here. The alternate was moving away from that. So it moved into a 5 minute presentation, and then a 15 minute presentation. And you can either use a poster or a slide deck behind the back from that. And again, this was thinking about students moving into industry, that labour market style assessment, provide opportunities for practical assessment. So far we've kind of seen everything move from written into something much more like practical, hands-on. Whereas this one actually went the opposite way. So this one, it did have a 15 minute presentation and it moved into a 1,500 word report on here. So this was looking at the course holistically and to give diverse assessment. So this particular module here was part of a course that had lots of presentations, and they wanted to give students an opportunity to showcase their written skills and also build those skills into there as well. And particularly for students that find group work really, really overwhelming, this provided an opportunity for those students to shine and showcase their learning from there. So what we've learned so far from here. So these are the kind of the big 3 points from here. You cannot run something like this and you cannot redesign assessment without supporting academics in the design, construction and implementation of these alternate assessments. The students also really need to be supportive. So similar to Paul's work around doing the video, if we're doing those types of things, we're bringing video into the assessment. We need to teach skills to those students. We need to teach students how to create a podcast, how to do a video, what tools are they going to have that are available to them to utilize that, so that they're able to really meet all of those learning outcomes and then showcase their learning from there. And again, student feedback was really, really, really positive over the kind of the whole of the pilot from the first year. So where we're moving with this. So it was really, really successful, and we've extended the pilot. So to become for this academic year. So what we're doing is we're building on the successes of last year. Any modules that were in the pilot last year are able to continue if they wish to continue as well. But we've also got a new range of modules that are also coming into this as well through genuine word of mouth of academics that were on the original pilot and want to then bring their colleagues on, or new academics that have heard about the pilot and want to come into the kind of the pilot from the second year. So that assessment choice pilot continues on this year. Particularly the kind of the big thing at the moment with us is designing with authenticity, but also with AI in mind, as we kind of tackle this kind of world that we're moving into and the world that our students are moving into as well. So that's where we lie, and that's where the kind of the project started, where it's going, and kind of how we're moving on from here. So if anyone wants to see anything more about kind of the work that we do, so you can see caddy.port.ac.uk as a real shameless plug. You can see kind of highlights of the alternate assessment pilot here and some of the other work that we do as well. And there's any good presentation ends, there's my references behind the back. But thank you for listening. I can see there's loads of great questions in the chat, which I'm sure we'll get round to in a minute as well. Cheers.
That's great. Excellent. Thank you very much. And you came in a minute under time. So excellent. So we had two excellent presentations, loads of things for people to think about. And from having a look at the kinds of questions that are coming out, really getting people to think, really getting people to comment. So I'm going to look at my colleagues who haven't been quite as obsessed with me about whether or not things are working with time. So Lillian,
Yep.
Ron, anything in particular? Do you want to start, if we perhaps do it in chronological order, start with any questions from Paul's session?
Yeah, and there were questions that might be suitable for both to
Yes, of
answer,
course,
to
yeah.
be fair. But yeah, I mean, I'll start with your question, Alistair, that applies to both speakers. To what extent do students need to learn new IT skills? And could this be seen as a benefit or a challenge?
Shall I go on that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they need to learn how to use video editing, certainly, but there are a lot of explanatory how-to videos that Sean points them in the direction of to do that. That's the biggest challenge. How do you overlay your video clips with music, for instance? And I think, I mean, even I have managed to do that for those clips that you saw this morning. They were handed to me, and I was messing around beforehand. Sean sorted it out, but yeah, even in like 15 minutes, I sort of got to grips with it. I would say that I've never done this assignment myself, and yeah, I'm sure I would struggle to start with, but I sort of worked through it. But there's a lot of self-help videos available and stuff from the university.
Can I ask, Paul, is there almost like a progression in that if they learn those skills at the beginning of that module or in that semester, would those skills come into play later on, so that they are genuinely kind of consolidating their learning?
So the sales pitch for doing these videos, because I don't know if any of my colleagues in any of the other modules that they do will do something using video, but it certainly is for things like the Wildlife Trust, which are a cash-strapped organisation, and there'll be loads of other similar types of organisations. If you can turn up and say, look, I know how to do video blogging, if you like, and we can, have you ever considered that? I really feel like they bring a skill that the people who are interviewing them will have no knowledge of, and I'm hoping in the short term they'll be just dazzled by it.
Yeah, sounds great. Chris, what about your context?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, and if we're changing the instruments of assessment, we need to equip students with those skills. So just in the same way that we'd equip students with referencing skills, if we're asking students to do like a podcast, for example, we need to equip students with those skills to do it. And there's a load of amazing free podcasting, just to take that as one example, tools that are available, but we do need to think about digital equity here with students, and we need to think about trying to level that playing field for students. So we're not disadvantaging students by creating an assessment where it requires a bespoke knowledge of a particular piece of software to really achieve those learning outcomes. So the focus of our kind of pilot wasn't about putting in those technical barriers for students. It was about giving opportunities for students to showcase their learning in an alternate way.
Brilliant. And when you were talking, Paul, about equipping students with these skills that were useful for them to kind of put on their CV and to sell to the people that they might want to work with, it's the same for digital accessibility, isn't it? That's a case for building that into all the assignments we ask students to produce, because they then have these skills to go out into the workplace. Next question then. Were these skills specifically assessed in the assessment brief? And Emma says, you know, the video was so excellent, so professional, but also the fact that, you know, these alternative assessments are a good way for students to potentially overcome being put on the spot with some of these presentation assessments, like in the Abrahart case. So if either of you would like to speak to that.
Yeah, I'll go on that one first. So if you imagine that because there's a question in there about the baseline, and does that get marked? You know, would they lose marks for not showing their face and walking in and off camera? They absolutely wouldn't, because there's plenty of clips in Countryfile where you don't actually see the presenter; they're just talking over the top of footage, for instance. And you know, a standard presentation that is engaging can still have a mixture of video clips that they themselves have shot or that they've used from Commons copyright online and downloaded and inserted it. But for me, the thing I really wanted them all to leave with is not necessarily just the new skills they've learned, but things like revealing bullet points one at a time, keeping the audience engaged throughout, using a high throughput of images all the time. Yeah, just make if it's a stand up in front of people presentation, it just makes it more dynamic than what they often do. They just put the whole screen up the slide, talk, and you've no idea. If you switch off, you've no idea where they are in that particular slide. And so it's all of those just standard basic things as well that I'm hoping they learn. They learn through error. And second year, it's the first module in the second year. The first year, I would say, is a fairly unchallenging year, and it steps up significantly in the second year. And so it's getting them up to speed, and so they can take that forwards to other modules where there is a standard presentation format.
I think as well, in terms of our approach, we where this was a pilot and students were opting into it, by taking that alternate assessment, students shouldn't be disadvantaged. They shouldn't be if the learning outcomes don't reference our presentation style, or like you've got to have really great video editing skills or something like that. We didn't change that. So we're only changing the instruments in which we are assessing those learning objectives on there. So yeah, it was important for us to build those skills in, and to offer students workshops, to offer students drop-ins, to do recommended, like if we're going to do a podcast, cool, let's use Adobe podcast on there, and then we'd use that as the benchmark. And then if students wanted to then go and do something a little bit more elaborate, then that's great for them. That's developing their skill set. And if they can take that to an employer and say, do you know what, actually I've at university here, I've done traditional essay writing, I've done presentation, I've done podcast making, that's of real value to employers. And being able to kind of take those skills and use it within their further work within the university as well, it's amazing.
I love the close link with employability that's coming through all this discussion, as well as accessibility, So Bethan's asking, were students shown good examples? Were they, obviously the first time you run such a module experiment, as you say, you pilot, you're limited as to what you can show the students. In my experience, the first year is like, they do something. Second year onwards, the skill level seems to creep up. I don't know if Paul and Chris, you've had experience of that.
Yeah, no, I think by the end of the module, not down to me at all, but down to what they themselves have self-taught, they get so enthusiastic about it. And I do know from personal experience that I get enthusiastic about something, I go and find out about it, and then I become like short-term expert on this thing because I'm so engrossed in it. And I think this happens with the students quite a lot. What was the question again?
Just whether students were shown any exemplars.
Yes. So that Anya video they were shown, it's a 7-minute video, and it ticks every single possible box. So, it really is good practice. And then there are 2 others I show them, and they're the only people I ever asked whether they give me permission to use it as an example. And since then, I haven't bothered to ask for anyone new. But I've only marked 15 of the 208 undergraduates this year, but there were 2 in there where they both scored 95, and I'm definitely going to ask them if I can use theirs once they've left the university. So not next year, the year after. So yeah, they definitely are showing good practice.
Yeah, and equally on our side, so if we're asking students to do a presentation, for example, instead of a traditional essay, is that of course what we want to do is we want to be transparent with students. We'd be like, this is what a good presentation looks like here. And they were provided with examples, they were provided with kind of best practice for presentations. So links to things like TED Talks, stuff like that, where we can showcase student, well, how do you tell a narrative through a presentation? How do you engage an audience? How do you kind of develop your story, but while also meeting those learning objectives within it? And the real focus behind the back of that was being really upfront with students and saying, these skills that we're teaching you here, they're not only just helping you complete this module here, but what they're doing is they're equipping you to become more employable going into the workplace. It's equipping you to have another string to your bow with when you're looking at assessment in the future. And that if you're giving a choice there, like maybe you might think about that, and maybe you were someone that was kind of that's always shied away from a presentation. That there are ways in which we can go around that. There's ways that we could do, rather than kind of stand and face a camera type thing, we could do like a narrated PowerPoint as a kind of like dipping your toes into the water with it, and that's really good. And if particularly if we look at our demographic as students, like the more of these skills that we can build that are centered around communication, with students being able to portray their message to each other, being able to portray their message to others as well. That's something that we, I think, as educators, really have a kind of almost a duty of care to be able to embed that within the student body. And if we can tailor our assessments to do that as well, I think that's amazing.
Both of you, you're both looking at alternative media and encouraging students to use different types of media, so podcasts, video, voiceovers, etc. To what extent are some of the digital accessibility tools or approaches being promoted to the students? Does that feature in any of the marking criteria, for example? Because if somebody ends up going to a wildlife trust and being their blogger or their podcaster, them having a good grounding in, if you're doing a podcast, you do a transcript. If you're doing a video clip, you do a transcript, or you have subtitles, etc. Now, I'm not making a judgment on this, but I'm just saying, to what extent is that opportunity kind of foregrounded to the students, or is that something that's almost in the background that some of them will and some of them won't?
Should I go first on this one, Paul? And so yeah, I think for us, where we weren't changing any of the learning outcomes behind this, like we can't start grading students on their ability to put sort of like subtitles on a video, stuff like that, if it wasn't part of the original assessment. But I think it's an opportunity to have these discussions, have these open discussions with students, and say, do you know what, like, how can we actually pull this in here? How can we make this more accessible? So you can do that in a number of different ways. So if you're doing like a poster, for example, how are you making that poster accessible to people that are looking at it? It's like, cool. How are you making a podcast accessible? Like, what type of things do we need to think about with a video? And these are just really good conversations to have with students. So when we were doing the workshops with students and we were offering those support guidance one-to-one sessions, that would be something that would be featured in as part of those. So students would get that wider discussion around kind of accessibility, how these mediums are then being used in the workplace, in their kind of everyday lives, and then they can start pulling apart and go, well, do you know what, actually the person that I watch on YouTube, like, their videos are really inaccessible here, and just becoming aware of those type of things. But for us to actually assess that, you'd have to change the learning outcomes, and it's not something that we did, for example. But Paul, I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, no, the same. Some people like Jonas at the end there, he put the lyrics up as text while he was singing it, but he didn't have to, and it doesn't, in terms of assessment, it doesn't make any difference whether they do or they don't. But yeah, certainly, and it's actually not that difficult to do, to add in. It's just a click of a button, and it will transcribe it, and then you can go through and edit the transcription, because it's nearly always got loads of spelling mistakes in it. But so it's not challenging at all, really. It's optional.
So one of the things that I'd just like, to use this opportunity with the folk that we got on the call, if you are looking at emulating the work Chris and Paul have been doing, do consider whether or not accessibility might be part of the marking criteria, because if it's not embedded at the beginning, it won't be there at the end. And obviously it's not necessarily going to be like 50% of the marks or anything, but I think it's a real opportunity to just make people aware and increase their employability as well, because European Accessibility Act and so on, it's really on radars. So thank you for that, and if anybody's listening and thinking, then do consider that. So
yeah, and everyone agrees, I think. Why are we kind of almost asking more of multimedia assessments when we can start, if we start with saying to students, your text documents need to be accessible, then by default, anything else we introduce to them, that way of thinking should be built in. So I'm hoping that this affects every single bit of assessment, not just multimedia.
Absolutely. I mean, I would just love. I look at student dissertations on kind of university dissertation banks, and so many of them are not in the least bit accessible
Yes.
digitally. So.
We have so many more questions we're in danger of.
Yeah, sorry.
This has been a great session for that. So there was quite a few questions around digital poverty and how you handled that in the two between the two speakers.
Shall I start, Chris, on that?
Go for it.
Well, if they don't have a mobile phone, for instance, we can offer them a camera, and we can offer them a mic. I don't know if we've ever had. I think once we had someone in the masters group said, "Oh, I haven't got a decent mic or something." They definitely had a mobile phone, but they wanted a good mic, and so we said, "Well, you can borrow one from the university," but they went out and bought one. So, yeah, we wouldn't set this assignment if we, the university, weren't able to provide all the facilities required to complete that to a high standard. If they don't have a laptop, well, there are rooms allocated. We've got a media centre or a media school and other rooms where they can access this. We've got computers where we can give them higher quality cameras to attach to the computer so they can record themselves on university premises. Yeah, sure, it's not doing it from their bedroom, but there are alternatives that are viable and of good quality.
I think our approach really is echoing Paul's approach with it, that we students had access to devices, whether if they were personal devices, that's amazing. But we didn't showcase anything to students or put in pieces, but like alternate assessments that required bespoke specialist pieces of software. Everything that we said to students could be done free from pieces of software that could be done on university laptops or could be downloaded onto personal laptops on there. And again, it's part of the kind of the underpinning of the project is that we're not trying to put in digital barriers for students. We're trying to allow students to showcase their learning in a totally different way. And it's just that change of thought with it. That's what we're trying to do. It's not about making like a Hollywood production or anything like that. It's about the skill set of doing something like that and showcasing your learning in that way rather than putting in a digital barrier.
Brilliant, thank you. I hope that answers the questions for people who are asking that question in the chat. Alistair and I were both asking about moderation. How does it become more complicated? For me, it was a little bit about, I think students sometimes wonder about the equivalency of, a poster as opposed to a kind of more finessed video and stuff like that. Do you have any thoughts about how moderation went and any challenges?
I can talk on that one. So Lillian, what you're talking about is this idea of parity, and where does parity come into it? So, like, what's equitable in terms of a 3,000 word essay? What does that look like as a presentation? What does that look like as a poster type thing? So that was done within the design of the alternate assessment, and there was a lot of work that was done between the academic and the learning design team around parity of, so if the original assessment was 3,000 words, like what is the parity behind that? So yeah, that was kind of key to the underpinning behind it. So we didn't want to make the alternate an easy option or a more difficult option. It's just changing the instrument behind it. So it's going from an, say, like a traditional essay to a poster behind the back of it. But yeah, that was done excessively at the start. In terms of moderation, so University of Portsmouth use a categorical marking scale, so it's made moderation quite easy in that respect. So we have a kind of a low, mid, high point for kind of the bands within it. And So the moderation actually worked out really nicely because we found academics rather than talking about like writing skills, for example, between an essay, we actually found them talking about the content and what they were actually being the learning objectives behind that, and that's the real kind of golden moment for us, I think. And like it was something that we didn't necessarily expect from the thing. But the moderation conversations were so much more valuable, not just for us kind of witnessing them, but also for the two academics as well, thinking about kind of, well, what are we actually trying to assess within this? Like, how is that student demonstrating their learning of that outcome? I can see Emma's put up a thumbs up within that as well. I can see it's echoed clearly across Northamptonshire as well. But yeah, it's that kind of golden moment for us. So yeah, that was one of the real lovely parts of it. Paul, I don't know your thoughts.
I don't have anything to add to that really, other than whenever I'm in doubt about. So even with how it's such a dynamic, complicated entity, a presentation, and especially one that's been recorded. There are so many things going on there that you could assess, and they're not all equal either. So, for instance, timekeeping, whilst I know in this sort of forum it is quite critical, if they go over time, they aren't going to be crushed for doing so. But and if they're bang on time, yeah, great, they're bang on time. But there are other things there, like did they keep me engaged for the 5 minutes? Well, that scores really highly because it's the whole point. If they've lost me as an audience after minute 1, what was the point of the other 4 minutes?
Yeah.
So it's that. I mean, it is either entertaining in the sort of country file way, or just entertaining, i.e. informing someone who wants to hear a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And drawing people into a subject that they were previously ignorant or unaware of.
I think
that's my baseline.
Brilliant. I think, yeah, absolutely. You make such valid points. Just get an A4 sheet of paper with some text on it, and you're either engaged by the writing or you're not. So it's exactly that methodology, isn't it? Is there evidence of the student kind of meeting the learning outcomes from that perspective? So another question from Alistair that I think is really valid here. Last question, I'm afraid, everyone. But by all means, if you have more questions, put them in the chat, and we can always kind of maybe keep recording, make this a slightly longer one, and keep on the discussion if the speakers are able to stay on. Alistair was asking, is there a risk of students being able to play to their strengths a bit more, which means they're not necessarily improving on their weaker skills?
I think that might be in reference to the Weightings project that I discussed in there. Yeah, as an honest answer. So yes, if you know you're really good at essays, why wouldn't you put the highest weighting in an essay behind the back of that? But the idea of that project is that it's giving students autonomy to decide where their best skill set in it. So they still have to do all of the three elements of it. So they still have to do the essay, still have to do the poster, they still have to do the discussion. But they're having a little bit of autonomy around where they can put that weighting for the grades behind that. So we did give them parameters within this. So they couldn't go like 98% essay and then 1% for each of the others. So there were parameters within this that we allowed students to choose from. We do have ethical approval for this project to publish behind the back of it. That's currently going out to journals at the moment. And without sharing too much of the major findings, we were able to narrow the gap between black and white students by doing this. Was one of the significant findings behind the back of this. I can't say too much more than that. Read the article when it comes out. It's a really, really good one. But yeah, it was one of the really, really positive things that we came out of the back of it. So yes, I think it's kind of it's quite controversial in some respects. Giving students the kind of the power to choose where their grades come from, but they had the kind of kind of the parameters that we had set within it. So there was that kind of the parity within it. And remember with this that students didn't have to do this. They could choose the original weighting. And we actually had some students that opted for an additional weighting but chose the original weightings. And again, some of the kind of the qual comments that came out of the back of that were that they felt that those weightings were fair and that suited the assessment.
I love the concept of choosing your own weightings within those different areas.
That just sounds amazing. I can't wait to thank you for bothering to publish to work on it as a research project, because we need this evidence, to bring to colleagues. So thank you so much for bothering to do that. It's 2 o'clock. I feel like we should do the wrap up and then we can continue if we want. But yeah, Ron, do you want to follow up with what one thing in the next webinar?
Yeah, I'm not going to show the resource again, but I put in the text chat earlier and again just now, just a reminder that we're always interested in what one actual thing you would do as a result of what you've seen and heard today before you leave. We will carry on the discussion as we normally do informally. And as Lillian said, maybe we'll keep the recording going for part of that. But yeah, we're interested in what one actual thing you would do rather than the kind of generic things like sharing the resource and whatever. And also the sign up for the January session, which kind of possibly follows on from some of this anyway, because it's about developing feedback and so on. You can sign up for that already, even though the details of who the guest speakers will be is not there yet.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the official ending of the 1 hour recording, but we're going to keep recording if that's okay. We often regret stopping the recording, don't we? Because the discussions continue to be really, really rich. So I'm going to carry on asking the questions if that's all right. Chris and Paul, do you have another 5-10 minutes? Cool. Okay.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappear now.
Okay, Alistair.
Thank you very much, both of you. I've got another meeting that starts at 2.
Okay. Thank you.
Fascinating. Loved it. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.
Bye. So I think Jim Harris was asking about evidence of group work learning outcomes. How would they provide any evidence that where group working was concerned that they had actually achieved those group working? Jim, I'll let you ask your own question.
It's wonderfully timed because I'm a learning designer at the University of Northampton. Previously worked with Ali Armalini, so it's great to hear his name. Chris, my boss, Emma, has already emailed you. I've privately said so, but it is so timely. I've had an academic say, I've got a student who stutters, doesn't want to be, doesn't feel that they can complete their part of the group presentation. What can we do as the alternative? And I had a look at the learning outcome, nothing in there about oral performance. It was about communicating. So I've suggested that they can use the student can write the script or whatever. Obviously, that's susceptible to AI development and so on. But actually commenting on what the group performance is, how have they communicated in digital form? And that could be the evidence that we could use. So again, it's not changing the learning outcome to try and fit the item. It's seeing, well, what is actually the need for that learning outcome? But I'm curious about that group work presentation, but then it's an individual report was one. Chris, I hope you don't mind me coming to you on that.
No, you're good.
Whether
You're
or
good.
not that was considered.
Yeah, I think in your case there, Jim, you're talking about a reasonable adjustment there. So what is a reasonable adjustment for that student? And I think the suggestion that you've made there is a really good one. So if the learning outcome doesn't actually specify that students have got to stand up and present with it, yeah, 100%. Like if they're showing communication in a different way, 100%. I'm all for that. And I think back to my days in teaching FE, and it's like I use the Britpop thing as an example. It's like if they're showcasing like the history of Britpop on there, cool, whatever. If it's an essay, great. If it's a podcast, amazing. Like if it's a poster that talks through the kind of development behind it, love it. And we're not here we're not here kind of discussing, well, you've got to do it in this way. And it's almost like a change of mindset for academics in that respect. And that's the biggest challenge that we come up against. Certainly as a learning designer, that's the biggest challenge I come up against. And it's we're providing the platform for students to showcase their learning. That's all we're doing. And as long as we're meeting those learning outcomes there, how we get to that path and how we kind of navigate down it, that could be so many different ways. And I come back to that, the one kind of takeaway from my presentation was we offer differentiated paths to the same learning outcome. So if a student's taking a straight road down it, amazing. If they're going kind of around the A34 then up the M25, that's fine as well. It doesn't matter as long as we're getting to that same outcome at the end of it. The question around kind of group work within that. So it would be written into the learning objectives. So because we weren't changing those, so if that was part of the learning objectives, then we wouldn't change that as part of the pilot behind it. A lot of group projects anyway, we do encourage an element of peer feedback as well. So where students will peer review kind of each other's performance within it as well, and then have that come as a small percentage, admittedly, of the kind of overall grade. A lot of academics with group projects, tend to give individual grades as well, rather than kind of a holistic group grade that would then sort of really reward that as well. So there's loads of different ways to do it, but the specifics of that one, I don't know kind of beyond those kind of generic comments, but we can continue the conversation elsewhere.
And if I can just grab a little bit more time. Well, there's two things. First is about working with Caves, colleagues against virtually everything. That mindset shift, that look, there are alternatives, and that leads into looking at that learning outcome and thinking about the Abraham Hart case and thinking about, is it actually the competence that you need from this learning outcome? Why is it group work? Is it because it's easier for you to mark, or is it actually the skill that is needed for the students? And that is the way in to say, is that the right learning outcome? Do we need to adjust it? And equally, the reasonable adjustment and universal design for learning, actually, you shouldn't need a reasonable adjustment because you've already got the offer there, but you've actually secured, well, this is the competence. It needs to be about you doing medication, or it needs to be about this. But we can provide you with flexibility in others, which moves away from that, a student always going for a poster because they know how to make posters. If there's a requirement for academic essay writing, we will have that, but it won't be the consistent thing throughout. Oh, sorry for taking time.
No, you're good, Paul. You're good.
No, absolutely. So then there's another question to both Chris and Paul around sustainability, scalability, because quite often assignments like that are very much driven by academics that are very invested in making this happen. And if you pass a module on to another colleague, they might not have the same investment in all those principles. So sustainability, scalability, but also added to that, there's almost a danger where it's such a good idea that more people do it, but you wouldn't want a student going through 3 modules and having to do 2 multimedia assignments on 2 of the 3 modules. So if either of you could, Paul, I don't know if you want to start.
Yeah, well, in terms of 3 modules in a row, then that's sort of down to the program organizer, coordinator, to make sure that there's no repetition. I guess we have historically had repetition anyway. I mean, everybody gets to write essays, no matter what degree they're doing virtually. Presentations, I don't know how frequent they are I guess they're quite a frequent thing, aren't they? And we've always done stand up and talk presentations. I don't know what we've ever done with big classes, 200 plus classes for presentations. I can't imagine how you would do that, really. You want individual grading. So, I don't know. I don't have answers to all of these issues, but
So
we haven't
I
always
could.
done it. Yeah, sorry, Chris.
Cool, cheers, Paul. So yeah, I think Mike's kind of said in the comments as well. Like, so yeah, it's a program level assessment. So looking at, we call it assessment diet, kind of like what's the assessment diet across a whole program. Like, if it's all essays, then we might need to have a look at that. And then like creating those opportunities for students to showcase their learning over a range of things. So. In terms of scalability, for us as a learning design team, that's like really crucial to anything that we do. We don't want the assessment to take more time for the academic to set up than the student to actually do, or like really heavy admin burdens or anything like that behind it. So we had a big, if you look at our work around reflective portfolios at the University of Portsmouth, of allowing students to showcase their learning journey over a elongated period of time. So built into the heart of that project was sustainability. So it was lessening workload for academics. It was reducing marking time. It was reducing admin time behind the back of it. And it's a sustainable solution that allows academics to think about the way that they're assessing and kind of move away from a traditional essay-based approach to a portfolio where students are reflecting on lived experiences, which is really, really difficult for large language models to do because they weren't there. So that kind of idea that students build up a portfolio of work over time, and again, very much inspired by my kind of background in music and working in the music industry for quite a bit. You often have what was called a portfolio career, where you do lots of little bits and pieces that all kind of went together to make one big thing. And that's where that work kind of comes from. But yeah, if you want to look at more stuff like that, then if you have a look at the Caddy website that's been chucked into the chat, then there's some resource on there.
Brilliant. And other people have shared really great resources. Helen shared the UDL, principles, and Jim Harris shared another really good thing on what did you share, Jim? I can't see it right now,
It was
but
on
Padlet.
assessment load, because I'd worried about that
assessment load.
equivalency. So we've got 50 hours goes
Yeah.
towards the assessment, so that's 2,000 words, is 25 hours equivalent. A presentation, is it still 25 hours of effort going into it? Equally, sorry to jump in, but I have a thing about a 5-minute presentation on how to transmit data through a black hole compared to a 20-minute presentation on what I did yesterday. It's not the duration of the item, it's the content and the understanding that's being demonstrated in it. And that's really got me thinking of, well, how are other institutions doing it? Where is their equivalency around reasonable adjustment compared to genuine optionality, and making sure that those options are appropriate, as Chris was mentioning earlier on. So that's what I've shared.
Okay, I'm going to throw in one final question. And this links to this idea of, multimedia assessments and possibility of challenges, but possibility of also overcoming challenges. Anonymous marking, which is a big feature of essays. Have either of you experienced any kind of pushback on the fact that the assessment methodology doesn't give them any, protection from an anonymous marking point of view?
Paul, do you want to go? Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
But how would you do it with a presentation? How would you do it with a standard presentation where they stand up in front of you? I don't know. You need hands and eyes and visual signals go with, a three-dimensional real-life presentation. So that's one issue. Okay, just standard presentation. And then if you make it a digital version where you're recording yourself, how do I know that the person speaking in the background there is that person? I mean, that is an issue I haven't ever addressed, and I know as of next year I will need to, because it only just occurred to me that people would do that. But yeah, so I'm going to have to get them to do a little inset of themselves while they're speaking, and then that means they are on camera. But at least a 10-second, 5-second thing right at the beginning to say that I'm Dave Jones and this is my presentation on. So the voice coincides with the face. But otherwise, yeah, what can you do about anonymous marking with presentations?
I think what we're talking about here is really good moderation. So if you have really good moderation, it doesn't really matter behind the back. And
Yeah, it
what we
does.
certainly found is that do you know what? Like the moderation conversations that we're having are just so much more valuable around it. And like Paul's right, if you how do you can't hide someone from a presentation, but the same thing happens with essays. It's like if you look at a final year student, whether they're a master's student, undergrad student, they've just done a dissertation. It would often be their supervisor that would mark it, that knows that student, knows who that student is. There's yes, okay, there's a student number that comes with it, but they know the project inside out. So as long as you have the moderation and that level of accountability behind the back of it, then the student shouldn't be disadvantaged by that. And we've certainly had no pushback on that from students or academics.
But I would love for the fact that we're having that discussion about it not being a problem. The fact that you're saying moderation is perhaps one of the ways to kind of ensure that assessment is robust and protects the student. Again, like we said about skill level and putting that lens back onto text documents as well as multimedia, the same. Why do written documents have to have this anonymous marking workflow where multimedia ones are exempt? You know, let's use that moderation as the strength that maybe carries all the way through. But yeah, that's great. It's been an absolutely wonderful discussion. I don't think we've had that many questions for our speakers. It's been overwhelming. We've overrun by 16 minutes. But thank you very much to our speakers and to everyone who's contributed links and questions. I will stop the recording here.
Great, thanks.